I think every time you do something like a painting or whatever, you go with ideas, and sometimes the past can conjure those ideas and color them, even if they're new ideas. The past colors them. I was born in Missoula, Montana. Then my parents got a house in Sandpoint, Idaho, and I lived there for 2 years. So I remember Sandpoint, Idaho. Little Dickie Smith, my friend, he and I sat in a mud puddle under this tree. My mother dug a hole, or my dad did, that we could sit in the hot weather. And they'd fill it with, water from the hose. And we'd sit in this mud puddle. It was so beautiful. And you get to squeeze mud and sit with your friend under the shade of this tree. Forget it. And then they moved to Spokane, Washington. In those days, my world was very, very small. It extended up to this grocery store in one direction and down to a friend's house, which was like two houses down. And then the other direction down to my friend Bobby's house. Mostly we played outdoors all day, and we made our own guns, and we would play war. And I would draw rifles and pistols and airplanes and knives and things like that, because the war was still kind of freshly over, and somehow we all got into it. Because I was always drawing, my mother did, this is the greatest thing she did, one of the greatest things. She refused to ever have me have coloring books. She did not do that for my brother or my sister. Somehow, really a beautiful thing came to her that those would be restrictive and kill some kind of creativity. And she did not ever tell any off-color jokes. She was totally against any racism. She was religious but not preachy about it. She was a what you'd call a very warm and good person, but she wasn't demonstrative. She wouldn't grab your cheeks and kiss you, not in a million years. But you knew that she loved you and wanted the best for you and expected you to live in a certain proper way. I never heard my parents argue ever about anything. They got along like Ike and Mike. Super happy household. You know, as I look back, I didn't think anything of it, but I had tremendous freedom. No one was overbearing. It was as if there was just a foundation of love, and off we went, you know, each in our own direction. One night, I kind of have the feeling it was in the fall, and it was pretty late. Usually, my father would go outside and yell, "John, David!" And that would bring us home. But this night, it must have been, I don't know, close to that time. It seemed to be pretty late. I don't know what we were doing, but from across Shoshone Avenue, out of the darkness, comes this kind of like a strangest dream, because I'd never seen an adult woman naked, and she had beautiful pale white skin, and she was completely naked, and I think her mouth was bloodied, and she kind of came walking strangely across Shoshone and came into Park Circle Drive, and it seemed like she was sort of like a giant, and she came closer and closer, and my brother started to cry. Something was bad wrong with her. And I don't know what happened, but I think she sat down on a curb crying. But it was very mysterious, like we were seeing something otherworldly. And I wanted to do something for her, but I was little. I didn't know what to do. And I don't remember any more than that. Like I said, maybe, you know, my world was no bigger than a couple of blocks up until high school. Really no bigger than a few blocks. And that's why I say huge worlds are in, you know, those 2 blocks. Huge. Everything's there. Everything. And you could live in one place and have everything. The night before we left Boise, it was a summer night, but it wasn't a joyful summer night. There's a triangle of grass between our house and the Smith's house. And at the base of the triangle, there's a tree. And I must say goodbye to everybody. The whole family was out there. My dad was out there. I think my brother and sister were out there. I don't know if my mom was there. She might have been just inside the house. And the Smiths were all out. We were just out there. And Mr. Smith came out. And I can't tell a story. I never talked to Mr. Smith, hardly ever. But, boy. Then we went to Virginia, and the day I started school, there was a huge hurricane. And the rain was coming down. You couldn't hardly see the school. It was like dark almost. It was so thick, this storm. There were 2 other guys starting school. And those 2 guys became my friends. But they were not the friends I should have had. See, Boise, Idaho seemed like sunshine, green grass, mowed lawns, such a cheerful place. Such a great place. Virginia seemed like always night. And I developed spasms of the intestines. And it was total turmoil. I was smoking cigarettes, going into DC and drinking, and sneaking out of the house at night. It was it was almost like I couldn't control it, you know? It just was what was happening. My mother's main saying to me a lot was, "I'm very disappointed in you." I was real busy not doing what she wanted, especially when I was in the ninth grade. I got in with a bad bunch and got into a lot of trouble, but I was really living in hell. I had to live two different lives, and I always felt that she thought, and I don't know why she thought this, and I don't know where this thing came in, but I had the feeling she thought I had something really good in me, like a high potential. So the reason that she would say she was disappointed in me is when she didn't see that thing. Not as an artist, but like just some kind of thing. I don't know where she latched onto that, but I kept kind of letting her down. I never studied. I never did anything. I hated it so much. I hated it like powerful hate. The only thing that was important is what happened outside of school. And that had huge impact on me. People and relationships, slow dancing parties, big love and dreams, dark, fantastic dreams, incredible time. I had a girlfriend named Linda Stiles. And one night, and it was about 9:30 or 10, somehow I was in the front lawn of Linda Stiles' house, and I'm meeting this kid, Toby Keeler, who didn't go to Hammond High School. He went to private school. And Toby told me his father was a painter, and that, kind of realization that you could be a painter popped, blew all the wiring, and that's what I wanted to do from that second. So I begged him to take me to his father's studio. And at that time, Bushnell Keeler had a studio in Georgetown. And I only actually saw it once, that next weekend. I went, Toby took me, introduced me to his father, and I saw his studio. And it was the classic studio. I mean, it was so beautiful. Bushnell could really set up a studio. many areas set up for like drawing and for painting and for different kind of experiments. And it was just what you would call, the art life, right before your eyes. I don't know when I started using the term the art life, but one of the things Bushnell did, besides just being a painter and living a life as a painter, he gave me the Robert Henri's book, The Art Spirit. And I loved that book. I can't remember much of it now, but we used to carry it around, and the art spirit sort of became the art life. And I had this idea that you drink coffee, you smoke cigarettes, and you paint, and that's it. Maybe girls come into it a little bit, but basically it's the incredible happiness of working and living that life. The reason we moved to Virginia in the first place is my dad got promoted basically to a desk job in Washington, D.C. So we lived in Alexandria, Virginia, and my father, instead of taking a bus or driving to work, would many days wear his Forest Service uniform and a 10-gallon cowboy hat and walk out the front door and walk into DC. It was so uncool to me to see him going off in this cowboy hat and this uniform. But then later, as it always happens with kids, now it seems super cool. And he was his own guy, he didn't give a shit about what was going on. This was what he was. Since my father grew up on a ranch, and you had to, if something's broke, you have to fix it. And we were always building things, always projects, always, working on one thing or another on the weekends. So this kind of goes in your brain that you can do these things, and they're fun. It made all this work really fun. And he was a research scientist, meaning he was looking into things. There's a lot of things like when you punch a pin into a bug, there's incredible textures just to a little bug. Incredible legs on insects and wings and innards. It's unbelievable. I wanted to get a studio in Bushnell's studio, a room he was renting me. I think it was $40 a month. And my father, bless his heart, said he would pay half if I paid half. So I got a job at Herter's drugstore delivering prescriptions at night. One time I came in during the daytime and I went to the soda fountain to get a Coke. And Jack Fisk was the soda jerk. And so he said, I hear you have a studio. And I said, yeah. He said, you wanted somebody else to share the rent with that? Then pretty soon, Jack was painting all the time down there with me, and it was too small. So then Jack and I got 3 more different studios. And I knew my stuff sucked, but I needed to burn through. I needed to find what was mine, and the only way to find it is just keep painting and keep painting and keep painting and see if you catch something. My father wanted me home at 11 on school nights. I didn't want to come home at 11. All I wanted to do was paint. So we had a big fight, and we never had fights. But this particular time, it was really bad. And I remember it like, it was terrible. And I said I wanted to stay out later than 11. And I might have said something like, well, I'm going to stay out later than 11. And my father said, fine, you are no longer a member of this family. And he's left the room. And this hit me like a sucker punch, just really. And I went up to my room. And I remember I just was like, devastated. But then Bushnell called my father because I explained to him, what it was. And he said to my father, he said, I don't want to interfere with any of your business, but I would like to let you know that every day David comes down here and is painting. He's not goofing around. And I wish my son had something that he loved to do and, was working like this. I just think it's important that he's real serious about this and he's really working. And so this went a long way with my dad. And I think after that, I could come home anytime I wanted. And it was totally cool. You really couldn't ask for a better father. He didn't have any kind of deviousness in him. He was really pure. And he was super fair, just naturally honest and fair. Whenever I wanted anything, his first thing was he'd meet me halfway. I'd have to do something, and he would do something. And I just saw that as a super good, thing. I would be able to get what I wanted with his help, but I had to do something too. Are you ready? in the 10th grade, the sunshine starts coming back. Then I made a whole bunch of different friends, and it started a good time. Now, all those new friends, we would go into DC all the time, but it wasn't the same dark vibe. So I still was living like maybe 3 lives now, because I had those friends and I would do stuff with them. I had my home life, I would do stuff there. And then I had the studio. So you act and speak and think one way in this environment. Then you act and speak and think in this other environment, totally different. And then another way of acting and speaking and thinking in the other one. For instance, my girlfriend, who was a beautiful, wholesome, wonderful person, I never brought her home. I never brought any friends home if I could help it. And I kept things very separate. And I did not want my parents to go to my graduation, but they went anyway. I just was afraid of what would come out if ever everybody got together. For some reason, I always liked the idea of going to Boston. And it just sounded like a good place. And my father helped me move everything in. And then he took me to the supermarket. And we stocked up on a lot of stuff and brought it back to the apartment. And then I walked out with my dad and said goodbye to him on the street and watched him drive off. Then I went back in my apartment and I never left. I was 2 weeks before school. I had a transistor radio, so I sometimes listened to music, but I ended up sitting in a chair. And the only time I got out of the chair was to pee or eat. And the batteries went down and down on the radio, so I had to hold it to my ear to hear it, and then it went dead. And so I was just basically really unable to do anything, and definitely unable to leave the apartment. And I say it took all my strength to go to school the first day. So it was something I needed to go through, I guess. But I still would much rather stay at home. And there is always a nervousness of going out. See you, Mary. I don't get out much. Come on. Come on. my father told me, you know, I could get this place, but I had to take a roommate. And my roommate later turned out to be Peter Wolf of the Jay Giles Band. He's a great musician and he knows the blues, but he didn't ever lift a brush. And the first night, there was another guy named Peter who had a pickup truck. And the three of us got in this pickup truck and drove back down to New York City and Brooklyn. And it was on that trip that I smoked marijuana for the first time. And then it was my turn to drive. So I was driving on a freeway, and pretty soon I hear, "David?" And I said, "What?" And they said, "David." I said, "What?" "David, what?" "You stopped on the freeway, man." And I had stopped right in the, not the right lane, but in the middle, because I was watching those white lines, and then they got slower and slower. It was such a dream. And the next time I smoked dope, Bob Dylan was playing, you know, at this big place right down the street. And so, lo and behold, out of thousands of people in this, you know, auditorium kind of thing, which was real steep, I was way in the back. Out of all those seats, when I sat down, there was this girl sitting next to me that I'd just broken up with. Then Bob Dylan came out on the stage, and I couldn't believe how little he was. And I measured him with my fingers on my knee, and I said to her, his jeans are only this big. Then I measured his guitar. I says, his guitar is only this big. And I wasn't even digging the music. It was so far away. So I wanted to get out of there really bad. Then when the concert was over and Peter came back with a bunch of his friends, he said, "Nobody walks out on Dylan." I said, "I walk out on Dylan. Get the fuck out of here." And so that was the end of Peter as my roommate. I just didn't want to be, you know, anywhere in this world that was, you know, now my world. I hated Boston. Boston Museum School was kind of like, to me, like going back to high school. I didn't like anything inside that building except the sculpture department. They don't do anything except make you do these exercises. And it's just drudgery. And they want the exercises to be a certain way. And if your way isn't that way, you're just gonna, you know, you're gonna flunk out of art school. It's a joke. And then no kids were serious about painting. So it was just kind of a waste of a year, and I quit going to school. And then I heard from Jack, he was fed up with Cooper Union. I was more than fed up with Boston Museum School, and we decided we were going to go to Europe. So we started making plans, and we found out this guy, Oscar Kakashka, had a class in Salzburg, Austria. So we decided we were going to go do that. But it was like not even half-baked, these ideas. So we were going to go for 3 years, but we came back in 15 days. So Jack was really my best friend, but when Jack and I came back from Europe, we had a pretty big falling out. Next thing I hear is he's up at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, which made me really happy for him. But Bushnell and some of the painters in that area, I would go to Bushnell's and have coffee with them, every day. And so he got this idea that he said, let's all snub David. Let's make life miserable for him. And then maybe he'll want to go back to school. And that's what they did. I'd go over there, they'd hardly talk to me. And I just started getting this strange feeling. And Jack telling me how good it was. One day I said, Bush, I think I'm going to go back to school. And he said, well, bully for you. He wrote a letter secretly to the school, a really powerful letter I did never know about it till way later. When I went up there to school, they not only accepted me, but they put me in advanced classes. And it wasn't anything to do with my work. It was Bushnell doing it. It was great. First of all, I wanted to go up there because Jack said it was good. But Philadelphia was one of the last places in the world I ever wanted to go. There's something about Philadelphia that I didn't like. And so when I forget the way the bus goes, but you're not in Philadelphia, and then you go across a bridge. And that bridge takes you. So on the bridge, I was saying, I'm not in Philadelphia, I'm not in Philadelphia, I'm not in Philadelphia. Then I got halfway over the bridge, I said, I'm in Philadelphia, I'm in Philadelphia. And I just couldn't believe it. Philadelphia was kind of a poor man's New York City. So it was a weird town. It was kind of a mean town. One woman who was my neighbor reeked of urine. And she was a complete racist. There was another woman who was totally crazy. She was a neighbor, lived down the street with her parents. And she would go around the backyard on her hands and knees and squawk like a chicken and say, I'm a chicken, I'm a chicken. And squawk and go around and around in this tall white grass in her backyard. She came up to me one day on the street and she said, oh, my nipples hurt. And she was squeezing her breasts and standing in front of me, squeezing them and shaking.
My nipples hurt.
Then there's that person I walk by, going to a store to get some smokes or something. I'm walking down the street. There's a very nice lady with her little boy, a little baby on her lap, out on the stoop. I'm walking by. I say, "How you doing?" "How you doing? How you doing?" She turned to her little baby and said, "You grow up like that and I'll fucking kill you." There was thick, thick fear in the air. There was a feeling of sickness, corruption, of racial hatred. But Philadelphia was just perfect to spark things. And the students were great, and they were workers. And we had a kind of camaraderie. And it was like the art life, the art spirit was alive and well. Philadelphia was what started it was so good for me. Really, really good. Even though I lived in fear, I kind of it was thrilling to live the art life in Philadelphia at that time. I had some kind of a cubicle set up in this painting studio at the academy. And when I went into my little cubicle, it was very private. And there were other cubicles like that around, but people could work in privacy. And I was painting a painting about 4 foot square. And it was mostly black, but it had some green plant and leaves coming out of the black. And I was sitting back, probably taking a smoke, looking at it. And from the painting, I heard a wind, and the green started moving. thought, oh, a moving painting, but with sound. And that idea stuck in my head. A moving painting. One night, I met the man who was the night man at the morgue at Pop's Diner. And I said, I sure would like to come over there and see. And he said, let me know, let me know. And so I went across over there, midnight, rang the bell. This guy lets me in. In the front was a kind of like had like those square tiles, green and kind of white, and it had a cigarette machine, a Coke machine, some couches, and desk. So it was kind of like a lobby room in the front. Then there was this big door with a glass pane in it, wire in the glass, and a doorknob, brass doorknob or something, and you open up that, go down this corridor, and now you're in, the back room where they do everything. But nobody was working because it's night. And I went into the cold room, and, he closed the door behind me. And so I'm in there sitting kind of on the floor, and there's these like bunk beds. All these people dead, bodies all around me. And I just sort of sat there and felt it. It was strange. And then I went home. The thing that gets you is that you wonder the story of each one. You wonder the story, who they were, what they did, how they got there. It just makes you think. And it makes you think of stories. This was 1967, and I was living at 2429 Aspen Street. Peggy had at that time sort of started moving in to 2429, and I get a call that my father had to make a trip from California out to, say, DC or something, and he would like to come up and visit in Philadelphia. So I said, oh my God. So I had to make arrangements. Peggy had to move out. Not move out, but not be there. And I picked up my dad and brought him back to 2429 Aspen Street. And we had a visit. And just near the end of the visit, I said, oh, I gotta show you some stuff. And I took him down to the basement, which was like earthen floor, really old, cobwebs and stuff all around the ceiling level, and dirty basement windows. But I'd set up these little tables, little like platforms out of wood and stuff, and I had all these experiments going. Like I wanted to see what fruit would do after a long period, different stages of fruit, how it would decay. And I had some dead birds, and I had my mouse in plastic, and I had, a bunch of stuff I'd collected. So I wanted to share this with my father. So I took him down to the basement, and it's pretty dim light. And looking at these things, I'm sharing with him, right? And he's looking at them. So then we went back up, and we were on the stairway, and I was ahead of him. And I was smiling to myself. It was great that he got to see this. And I kind of turned with a smile as we were going up the stairs. I turned back toward him, and I see this pained expression on my father's face, which he was hiding from me. Then I got back in the truck, and we were driving back to the railroad station. And it was in that truck driving back to the station that he said to me, Dave, I said, yeah, I don't think you should ever have children. He is worried about me. But inside me, I felt there's nothing to worry about, but I still understood why he said it. He misunderstood my experiments for some kind of like diabolical, man who needs serious help mentally and probably emotionally. The ironic part of this is, unbeknownst to me and my father, Peggy at that very moment was pregnant. So that's interesting. I started doing a kind of a split screen thing, and it was going to be Mary Fisk dancing on 1/3 of the screen, and on the other 2/3 an animated thing. So I animated that thing for 2 months, and I had 100 feet of film in the camera, and I didn't know what I was doing really, but I took the 100-foot roll out of the camera, took it to the lab, and a couple of days later I got it back, and I was standing in the doorway because I would open the door so I could get sunlight, and I just wanted to check the first part, make sure everything was okay. So I unspooled, there's a lot of leader on it, and I unspool some more, and I can't find anything, I unspool some more, and it dawns on me that this entire roll of negative is a blur. And Peggy, her recollection is that I was really upset. But in a strange way, I wasn't that upset, because I must have been getting an idea for something more, and I wanted to do live action and animation, both. That's when I made the alphabet. So accidents or destroying something can lead to something good. It can lead to something good. Very controlled things, not being open to, just like being like these boundaries, they just screw you. And you have to sometimes make a huge mess and make big mistakes to find that thing that you're looking for. Right after the alphabet was finished, we must have moved up to 2416 Poplar Street. It must have been right around then that we needed money. And I was sawing wood in the dining room. And it was like, the sweetness of freedom was just going. but I loved sawing that wood. It was my last free night. And then I started this job, and I'd go there, 5 days a week. When I was printing for Roger Lapel, Jennifer was like 2 or 3 or 4 months old. I had applied for a grant to the American Film Institute, an independent filmmakers grant. The winners of the first group were announced, and when I read the names of the winners, I knew I wouldn't win, because they were all really well-established underground filmmakers. So, and they had their bios and all this stuff with them. So I just gave up. I mean, I didn't really give up. I just said, there's no fucking way. So I would go to work printing, and Philadelphia, it's like already just suck your happiness away and fill you with a sadness and a fear. So, I didn't have any time really to paint, but Roger would give me $25 to come out on Saturday and paint, and then pay me for printing. And that's what kept us afloat. One day, a few months later, I said to Peggy, call me if anything exciting happens. I'll call you if anything exciting happens. And I headed out to print. That day, first, I think Peggy received a phone call, because the phone rang and Roger came downstairs from upstairs, sort of smiling, and said, the phone's for you. And it was George Stevens Jr. and Tony Villani on the line. And they said, David, we're very happy to tell you that you have won a grant from the American Film Institute. And, it just, total life-changing phone call. In the house, I kind of had started to have a setup. And when I made the film, I had all these rooms to shoot the film right there. I only had a couple of scenes outside. It was just perfect. Tony Villani came up to Philadelphia on the train, and we showed him the grandmother. Tony flipped out. I drove him back to the train station, and On the way, he said, David, I think you should go to the Center for Advanced Film Studies in Los Angeles. Well, I almost died and went to heaven just him telling me that. I'd seen this booklet of the mansion and all this stuff going on there, and I would just look at this booklet and dream about this place. And here was somebody telling me, basically he's going to help me get there. You want a round cake?
All around.
Okay.
It's the big little dot.
A cake with a candle. Cake with a candle. Hot dog. There's the babies. There's the cookies for the babies. Honey cookies. I thought when I got married, I said, okay, that's it. That's it. In some way, your life is over. But it was actually the best thing that could have happened to me. Because, there's certain things that come along that get you off the dime, you know what I mean? And I didn't think of where I would go if I wasn't in Philly, but it seemed like I was gonna be there. Because to get up and move, had that huge house, it was such a setup. But I didn't know, it wasn't that I was miserable at all. It's just, it seemed like no, it wasn't miserable. It just, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that grant. I really don't. So when we drove out, we went to down Sunset and turned left on San Vicente, parked the big truck. And the next morning was that first morning I experienced California sunshine. Unreal. I just stood in the street and looked up at the sun. It was unbelievable. And it was a kind of a thing where it was pulling fear out of me. Imagine coming from Philadelphia, that world, out to LA and being shown where you're going to go to school, a 55-room mansion on the top of a hill in the best part of Beverly Hills, and the stables were given to me. And it wasn't like anybody else even wanted them. It was just, they were sitting there, and I was able to get them. It's just unbelievable. What a gift that was. Unbelievable. For 4 years, I had those stables. And able to build down there, live down there, eat down there, it was incredible.
No. Hiya, Fred. No.
I just love being in that mood. Sometimes I would sit in the sets at night. I'd be working or something and I could imagine a whole world outside. It doesn't exist, but it really would be such a world. Around me was the factory neighborhood, and I'd imagine it, and it was so real. And sometimes it would rain, and I'd hear this rain, and I'd be in this room, and I knew what the streets were like out there and the diners. It was really dark and filled with smoke and big factories, huge smokestacks, fire and smoke and steel, and these homes with little doilies and stuffed chairs and hot inside and pipes kind of leaking and all these things. I was divorced from Peggy and living at the stables, and my brother was visiting out in Riverside, and my brother and my father wanted to talk to me. I sit down, I remember it was dark in the living room. Then the whole thing was, give up this film and get a job because you got a child and this film isn't getting made and you're wasting your time, this kind of thing. And it got me really in a deep way, because they didn't understand, and I just couldn't believe it, that what they were saying to me. And they were totally serious. And so I left there and I went back, and my sister was in the back bedroom, and I started crying. But it was just one of those things where there was no way I was gonna do that.
See, what I want to do is have mainly the look on Henry's face, you know. God, it's just like so real. I feel like he's here. But anyway, the look on Henry's face just when he's getting ready to cut, you know, the big cut.
Eraserhead, to me, was one of my greatest, happiest experiences in cinema. And what I loved about it was the world and having it be my own little place where I could build everything and get it exactly the way I wanted it for hardly any money. It just took time. It just was so beautiful. Everything about it. Everything about it.
Thank you.